Good morning, guys. You don't get to see me because it's morning. See, it's still dark out. And I don't have my hair done, which I never have done. And I don't got no clothes on, which I usually have on. I got my nightgown on. You all don't need to see that. Alright, we're going to attempt to get us our 20 minutes in on this book. So we have a 20-minute class. Yeah. I'm just going to do my project. That's all I can say about it. So we're going to back up. Oh, I'm missing my pencil. I can't be your professor without a pencil. Continuing. Behavior therapy relies on the laws of conditioning, but before looking at behavior therapy in operation, it is necessary to discuss a second type of conditioning called operant conditioning, the potential of which was explored by American psychologist B.F. Skinner. Classical conditioning is concerned with responses. A tuning fork comes to elicit the response of salutation in a dog. A child takes its hand from a boiling kettle after it has been scalded. It is the tone or the burn that causes the reaction. Operant conditioning is concerned with behavior that is initiated by that behavior's resultant effects. Skinner believes, in line with his predecessor Thorndike, who said at first that behavior is shaped and manipulated by its consequences. As a simple example, a woman who buys peaches from a particular market stall and on 2 occasions discovers afterward that they were bad will most probably change the place where she buys her peaches. If, however, the peaches are consistently of excellent quality, she is likely to stick with the street vendor who sold them. Her original behavior, going to that vendor, has been reinforced by its consequences, acquisition of good peaches. Skinner used a variety of constructs and mazes and enlisted the aid of rats to prove his point. One construction was the Skinner box, a unit which released a food pellet when a lever was pushed. The rat was put into the box. In a rat-like way, it wandered around the box until it accidentally pushed the lever and received a fruit pellet. Well, the rat ate it and carried on wandering about. And on again, accidentally pressing the lever, another pellet appeared. Gradually, the rat narrowed down its field of activities so that the lever got pressed more often. Finally, it made the association of lever and food, and when it was placed in a box, it headed straight for the liver. The consequence of receiving food reinforced the action of pressing the lever. Positive and negative reinforcement are not always easy to distinguish. On a basic level, this seems simple. A child who reads aloud a page from his reading book and then is then given a sweet is encouraged to repeat the behavior. Subscribe, like, comment. The child who reads aloud and finds his mother wasn't listening and certainly doesn't praise him is not encouraged to repeat the behavior. However, why should it be the case that very often in mental handicap hospitals, a child will repeatedly engage in destructive behavior that only brings it punishment? Or why is it? Why would that person? The punishment would be expected to act as a negative reinforcer for the destructive behavior. It is only now being realized that, in fact, the punishment is a positive reinforcer in this particular circumstance. For a child locked in a room with countless other children, any attention from the staff is a desirable end. If the only way to get attention is to pull down curtains or knock things off a table, Well, that is what a child will resort to. As in classical conditioning, extinction of the behavior pattern will occur if the reinforcements aren't forthcoming. But how quickly extinction occurs depends on how regularly reinforcement was forthcoming in the first place. The child who gets a sweet every time he reads out loud is likely to stop bothering very quickly. If, on a couple of consecutive occasions, he doesn't get a sweet for his pains, hold on, let's try rereading this one again. I misunderstood it. The child who gets a sweet every time he reads out loud is likely to stop bothering very quickly. It's likely to stop very quickly if, on a couple of consecutive occasions, he doesn't get a sweet for his pains. I see. If, however, his mother sometimes gives him a sweet when he read out loud, but not always, he would carry on reading much longer after the reward stopped, because he would have no way of knowing that the situation had changed. I was thinking perhaps if he didn't get a treat a couple of times, he might think himself, I can do it better. He might go through a phase of trying to improve himself to get that attention before he would just stop if he doesn't get him anymore. That kind of thing. I mean, it's like people who have a talent and nobody supports them, but they believe in themselves and they push forward and they finally achieve their goal. In that case, their handler, the mother or the controller, the doctor, in that case their handler wasn't giving them a sweet every time he read out loud, but he continued to do it anyway. And it couldn't be called rebellion or mental handicap, as if he kept doing it even though he was punished because he has a deficiency, or he kept doing it because there was no reward because he had the deficiency. It was simply his freedom to express himself. But I'm just saying that this dichotomy here is very simple. It's not very inclusive to different types of personalities. Like, for example, me. For example, I'm doing this, and I'm not getting any reward for it, but I'm doing it because it is a passion. That's where am I outside of Skinner's domain? Well, I don't know. If I started getting negative attention or beat every time I read it, I would probably, at this point, the argument goes backwards. Given a sweet every time he reads out loud is likely to, the child who gets a sweet every time out loud is likely to stop bothering very quickly. So does it also work that if I get a beat every time, that I will probably stop doing it? So that's an interesting topic. I don't know how to discuss it. Let's see what the book's going to go into, but there's just this other side. I'm going to write here, passion versus punishment. I can't spell, but we're going to try to look into that at some point in time. Slot machines provide another example of these different kinds of reinforcement. A person who put money on a chocolate vending machine expects chocolate every time. If a bar doesn't come out, he won't use that machine again, or will be very wary of it. One-armed bandits, however, are another matter. Here, the rewards for one's coins are intermittent. One is more likely to go on playing a broken one-armed bandit for longer than one would play a broken chocolate machine with coins. Using what he had learned about the power of reinforcements, Skinner found that he could shape quite complex behaviors in animals that was quite contrary to anything they would normally instinctively do. By offering reinforcements in the form of food, he taught pigeons how to bowl, using a marble as a ball. Skinner offered food each time the pigeons went near the marble. More food if the pigeons actually touched the marble. Eventually, he succeeded in conditioning the desired behavior. Shaping of behavior has been much used in work with the mentally handicapped in order to encourage them to learn to lay a table or to get dressed alone. Reinforcement in question may be praise or affection, that kind of reinforcement. Quite complex chains of behaviors have been conditioned in animals by the use of reinforcers. A famous rat called Barnabas was taught to climb a staircase when it received a certain signal, a light coming on. Pushed down a drawbridge to cross to a platform where it climbed a ladder to pull a chain which brought a car close enough for him to get in and pedal across the bridge, where it got out. Climbed another stairway, ran through a tube, and got into a lift and raised a flag which signaled the lift to go down to the ground. When the lift touched the ground, a buzzer went off, and by running to press the lever while the buzzer was sounding, Barnabas at last received a food pellet. Similarly complex but much more amazing chains can be conditioned in humans too, as we shall see. However, 11. However, it is not always plain sailing. Just as it was shown that reinforcements can be positive and negative for different reasons and for different people, it was said in a previous chapter that the Chinese had to discover whether rewards or punishments had the desired effect on different prisoners. So, natural behaviors can sometimes interfere with complex learned actions. Several researchers have found that animals trained to trade in a coin for a food reward may end up trying to eat the coin instead. One porpoise, the porpoise for this porpoise, one porpoise even died when it swallowed the baseball bat that had been associated with food. Such hiccups notwithstanding, behavior can clearly be manipulated by using what we know of conditioned learning. It can be manipulated consciously or unconsciously. Behavioral therapy is about conscious manipulation of behavior. It is based on the principle that maladaptive behavior patterns caused by faulty original conditioning can be replaced by better, more functional ones. Suppose, for instance, that a mother brings her child for help to a clinical psychologist because the little girl has tremendous temper tantrums and screaming bouts when she's about to be put to bed at night. What happens, she tells the psychologist, is that the girl is kissed goodnight and left in her room. As soon as she is alone, she starts to scream. After a while, the noise becomes so ear-splitting that the mother fears for the child's safety and the reactions of the neighbors, and she goes to comfort the little girl and try to coax her to sleep. The psychologist tells her that unwittingly she has conditioned her child to learn that cuddles and sympathy are a reward for making terrible noise. The screaming behavior has been reinforced by the fact, I see where he's going, but I'm not so sure. The screaming behavior had been reinforced by the fact that affection and attention are always eventually forthcoming. The reinforcement has to be extinguished. So we have questions here. The mother is told to ignore the girl's screams no matter how long they go on. After a few nights, the child will cease to associate screaming with attention. Instead, she receives affection from her mother in the morning. The more affection, the quicker she went to sleep the night before. A new, more desirable pattern of behavior is then set up. protest against all kinds of harshness. How would you be in that situation where you were trying to change the behavior of something that was irritating to you, maddening? You've all been irritated like that. Nothing can irritate you more than a toddler squelching in their bed at night, and it makes you angry. So you have to yourself have to do some retraining. So basically, I wonder if parents who are learning to reinforce good behaviors of their children need to also be parenting themselves at the same time to identify the triggers in themselves. Because what if your child who screams is thinking many things, is thinking you're hurting, mommy's lonely, mommy needs me, or mommy keeps getting upset every time she puts me to bed and I scream and cry, and then she comes in and yells at me and she's mad at me. Is the child going to say, my screaming makes mom mad? Or is the child going to say, well, if she didn't leave me in the dark, she wouldn't get upset? Because the child's not going to look at their own behavior. Is the reason why things happen. I don't know. Psychology is too fascinating. And I'm just trying to stall you guys out for the 20 minutes. And then we'll try to get more 20 minutes later, after work. Alright. What we're trying to learn about here is the very simple surface level. So, a behavior therapy technique called desensitization. Desensitization has been found effective for the treatment of many phobias. If a person suffers from severe agoraphobia, the fear of going outside or wide open spaces, a therapist requests that the therapist requires the patient to devise a list of situations that she finds frightening, working up from mildly alarming to utterly terrifying. Number 1 on the patient's hierarchy may be walking down the front path. Number 10 might be shopping in a crowded supermarket. Having first taught the patient some relaxation techniques, the therapy then takes her up the hierarchy step by step by accompanying her in each of the named situations, or by asking her to imagine them. The patient is required to apply the relaxation techniques when she starts feeling anxious. What is happening here is that the patient is learning not to reinforce her fear by avoidance of the situation, but by going through it and relaxing, to reinforce the realization. Having walked to the gate or shopped in the supermarket, nothing terrible happens. A similar technique is called flooding. Instead of gradually working through situational fears, the patient faces his worst fears all at once. The traumatic experience is repeated until the fears are overcome. The most controversial form of behavioral therapy is aversion therapy, where unpleasant associations are forced with the desirable behaviors. Where unpleasant associations are forged with the undesirable behaviors concerned. For instance, a person who likes people way out of their... No. A kid diddler may be shown slides of attractive young children, while at the same time receiving an electric shock. The idea is that the patient will eventually cease to associate young children with pleasurable adult feelings. It is not a method that has had signal. It is not a method that has had signal success in deterring deviance of any description, and has incurred much outrage from those concerned by behavioral therapy's potential as an agent of control. Those psychologists who defend it claim that it can only be effective if the patient is motivated to change and therefore complies with the requirements of the treatment. Thus, it is not coercion, a big question mark about that. I mean, how could it be, if used in this way, the patient wants to heal, so give me the electric shocks, doctor. You give me electric shocks, I'm sure to learn my lesson. Could easily change his pathology into something else, like sadomasochism. You know, you can turn one thing into another. Anyway, that's too complicated. And we're about to stop this, so I'm going to finish this paragraph, and then we're going to stop right there. However, some mental patients, it has been pointed out, may be motivated to comply not because they want to change, but because that they fear their discharge date might depend on it. So that's the other factor involved with this. Alright, guys. Alright. I hope you have a good day. I will see you later. Part 11.